All right, friends, it is about that time. It is about that time. So may I call us all to order here, please? As a reminder, we have been beginning most of these classes during our Rekindle Garden series.
Oh, we should
Singing together. Sacred music from our tradition. Oh, but we need your soprano. All right. Now, the best news about this, oh, of course, the best news, come on, yes. We all know this one.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? Now, I know it's Advent, but we have been singing these songs through the lens of creation care, eco-theology, right? Thinking about the intersection of our faith and nature, creation, right? Our relationship with what God created and created good. So, as we sing Joy to the World, which I know is more of a Christmas, we think of it being Christmas Eve, right? Not Advent. I want us all to think for a second about when we usually sing this. We might usually sing this hymn at 11 o'clock, Christmas Eve, after passing the peace, the light of Christ with one another, right? We walk outside, it's snowing. It's beautiful. It's very Robert Frost. But that's not what we're doing tonight, right? We are not thinking about how it's Christmas Eve. We're not thinking about how we're in that moment. Instead, we're going to look and we're going to feel and we're going to sing about how creation is mentioned in this text, all right? We are going to think about Isaac Watts, Handel, and Lowell Mason, right? And where we see scriptural ties and where we see images, references, and allusions, if you will, to creation. Now we're going to sing this with some tempo, because Dr. Brown is here. She's got some amazing stuff for us to hear. So we're going to go at a pretty good clip. And I'm pretty sure it starts right here. Yeah. All right. That might be a little high, but can we do that? Can we watch that one? All right. I said this last week. Every minister wants to be the director of music. Every director of music wants to be the minister. So I'm living into my fantasy here. Joy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. And heaven and nature sing. And heaven and nature sing. And heaven and nature sing. Joy to the earth, the Savior reigns. Let all their songs employ. While fields and floods, rocks, hills, and plains, repeat the sounding joy. Repeat the sounding joy. Repeat the sounding joy. No more the sins and sorrows row, nor those infest the ground. He comes to make his blessings flow, far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love. Round of applause. You sound amazing. All right. Everyone that's participating on Zoom, you sounded amazing too. That's great. So, singing Joy to the World, not thinking we had just finished Silent Night, right? But singing Joy to the World thinking about it through this lens, what are some things that maybe raised? What did we notice? What struck us seeing joy to the world through the lens of eco-theology this time?
Fields and floods and hills.
Fields, floods, and hills, absolutely.
Heaven and nature sing.
Heaven and nature sing, amen.
That's a biggie.
Amen, heaven and nature sing.
And I sing this at different points just because I love it. And I feel happy. And so the word joy comes to me and it comes out.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you'll note, the little like bio on the bottom says actually this was not written for Christmas. It's based off of I think it's Isaiah, is that right? Actually Psalm 98, 4-9. But so it's not just for Christmas. So what you mentioned actually, Link, fields and floods, rocks, hills, and plains. When I was preparing for our little prayer this morning, it reminded me, when are other times in scripture where rocks cry out? What struck me was the Palm Sunday reading, absolutely.
If they didn't do it.
So on Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, even the stones cry out. And we sing that when we sing of Jesus' birth. Anything else? Anything else, or should I introduce us all to Dr. Cynthia Brown? All right, friends, that was an amazing prayer. Dr. Brown, I'd love if you could come up, please.
And I'm not a doctor, I'll let you know. I don't even play one on TV. But thank you, I'm just thrilled.
It's wonderful to have you. Cindy Brown is the manager of Horticultural Collections Management, this is right, and Education at the Smithsonian Gardens, a position that she has held since 2010. Cindy leads a talented team overseeing the Smithsonian Garden archives, object and living collections, education, and web and social media. Dr. Brown was recently included in Jennifer Jewell's amazing book, The Earth in Her Hands, 75 Extraordinary Women Working in the World of Plants. Which features 75 inspiring women working in wide-reaching fields that include botany, floral design, landscape architecture, farming, herbalism, and food justice. We are honored, thrilled, delighted, and blessed to welcome you today. Thank you so much.
Where would you like me to just?
Here.
You can go wherever you want.
Okay.
Absolutely. I've got to put my mask back on, so I'm sorry. Welcome.
But wouldn't the camera get her up here?
So the camera right now is set to find the sound
Okay.
and then go to wherever the sound is. That's the setting it is, because
Okay.
I didn't want to play with it during our class.
Okay.
And this mic is supposed to pick up everything.
Okay.
So fingers crossed it.
All right, well, that's good, because I don't like to stand still. In fact, that's one of the reasons I got involved in gardening, because I have children. And I like to be outside, and I don't like to just sit and read a book and garden. I wanted to be able to move around and keep them entertained and play with them, be there for them, but not necessarily push them on a swing. So I started gardening. I've been gardening for a very long time. I gardened even before then, but I like to say that was my official entry into gardening. And so I officially learned how to grow tomatoes in Washington State, which is not easy. If you've ever in Washington State, grow lots of great things. Tomatoes are not one of them. But I'm so glad to be here, because this is something, gardening is my passion. It's not just my job, it's my passion. It's what I've been doing and what I've been preaching about for years, even though I don't do it in theology. But it is something that means so much to me, and I enjoy sharing with others. And I've enjoyed sharing tales of gardening, of sharing, well, have you thought about this if you're trying to grow this? Have you tried this? And I'm a firm believer in master gardeners, because I think that's a really good first step when you're trying to learn how to garden, to be able to think about what's the science behind it. Horticulture, which is the field I have a degree in, is the combination of art and science. And so it's not just looking at one part of it, it's looking at the whole creation, the whole kit and caboodle, so that you understand, if you want something to look good, if you want the art to be successful, the science has to be successful. If you want the science to be successful, you've got to entice with beauty. And that's why I got involved in gardening. So I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I know ministers take notes because my father did that. So I wanted to be able to have some notes to remind me what I wanted to share with you. And I hope you will interrupt and engage and argue with me, because everybody should have an opinion about our piece of earth that we maintain, or that we visit, or that we love, or sings to our hearts. So please engage with me and don't worry about interrupting. But I wanted to say gardens can heal, restore, teach, and feed us in many, many ways. And it has done that to my life. Garden has been in passion. So I wanted to talk about, and you said this was great, in threes. First, what gardening means to me. What do I get out of it? Second, what gardening means as a professional. And it is different. We get so many volunteers that come in to help us out. And before I was at the Smithsonian, I was at Greenspan Gardens, which is right up the road, kind of, on Little River Turnpike. So we would get volunteers to come in, and they didn't understand between gardening at home and gardening professionally. And what am I trying to do by gardening professionally? And then the third, what are you all doing in gardening? Because this cannot be a monologue. Maybe today it could, but any other time, it really can't be a monologue, because you need to learn from others. You need to share with others. You need to engage with others. Otherwise, what you've learned is nothing. It just falls into the soil and is forgotten. And what you can learn from others is so meaningful, because then you start to understand differences. Because there's no one right way to do anything in gardening, other than the roots do always go down. Always. I'm trying to think if there's any exception to, I don't think so. I think the roots always do go down. You might be an epiphyte, in that case, the roots go all over the place. But, so what are those things? So for me, gardening provides me with so much pleasure. I'm not a girly girl. My daughter wishes I was. She still yells at me. She's 41 and she still yells at me, why didn't you teach me how to wear makeup? I might have worn makeup once or twice, but really not. But it gives me such pleasure. I can't think of a better afternoon. To me, the best day in the world would be to get up, do my yoga, go outside, work in the garden, and while I'm working, listen to some music, and then bring the food in that I have grown and cook for friends and listen to more music. That would be the perfect day. So you can tell that gives me the most. But I had to learn some things too when I'm gardening, because gardening's not about plants entirely. Yes, there are canvas. They're what we're working with. We're trying to get them to work best together. So picking individual plants out doesn't work as well as doing a plant community. So plants are important, and understanding plant communities are important if you're going to get the science of it. But what really gardening is about is sharing again with others. In my garden at home, I didn't have any room for others. It was just me. And that was so selfish. When I thought about it, actually, I was just trying to cram as many plants in my garden as I could, because I wanted to learn about them. But I realized to learn about them, I had to hear from others. So now my garden has a patio. I had to take away some of my plants. But now there's room for people to join me, to enjoy my space, to enjoy the space that I've created. And it's better because of them, because there's bits and pieces of them in the garden. Dr. Paulson was my mentor years ago. He was, believe it or not, a rear admiral that was a dentist that worked on a ship outside of China after World War II and helped out with dental procedures. But his passion was dwarf conifers. So he brought me in and he was teaching me all about dwarf conifers, but you can't eat them. So I left them behind because I really like to cook. But so I have some of his dwarf conifers, and I greet Dr. Paulson every morning. And I say hello and how are you? I remember you. He has died, but I remember you. And I'm sorry, I'm very passionate. So if I start to tear up, it's not you, it's me. And I say hello to Donna, because she gave me this hydrangea. And all of them put together make my garden beautiful and make it for others. So passion. It allows me to be, yes.
I was going to say, maybe I totally wanted to tell you about the passion. I have Grandma Elsie's begonia, which was on the cement patio for years in Murrysville, Pennsylvania. She died
Morrisville, Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Murrysville, yes.
Morrisville, not Morrisville.
No, Murrysville.
Okay.
She died in 1989. And half of the gardeners in Northern Virginia, half the master gardeners in Northern Virginia have Grandma Elsie's begonia. I mean, she knows because she's been to a lot of the master gardener things.
Yeah.
So it can be, and I have a plant for my husband's mother too, but it's not my mother. Plants are my mother's too, but-
Yeah, and they can trick you sometimes. I have irises that I thought were my grandmother's. I got them out of my mom's garden. She always used to talk about grandma's irises. Guess what? They weren't grandma's. But I still say hi to grandma as I go back and it's because I thought they were. Well, thank you. Thank you. It is passion. It's truly passion to try to care for something when they can't talk back to you. So passion is important. Creativity. What can you do? I mean, this is a field where I won't say if you do it right. If you do it with nature in mind, you are going to follow the pattern of the plants. You're not going to try to dictate your law upon them. And I apologize ahead of time if there are any bonsai enthusiasts in here. I have a thing against bonsai because it's putting our will onto a plant, making it do what we want it to do rather than listening. So I think listening to plants makes you a more creative person. If you really allow that plant to function the way it has it in its nature. I'll say that. There's no such thing as good and bad in gardening. It's just how you interpret it. Same thing in taste. So you can have blue balls, gazing balls outside your house if you want to. It's a source of food for me. And if you've ever seen some of my lectures before, I love to grow my own food, my own herbs, because it's something that I am now sustaining my family with something that I have grown. I'm able to be more creative because I've taken that tiny little seed and know its path before it goes into my salad or goes into, I'm trying to think what I grew this year. Lots of hot peppers, a big mistake. Lots of jalapeno jelly, my jalapeno, what is they called? Cowboy jam is now famous amongst my children's friends because they love it. So that, I told you about my family and my friends. To me, I would love to be in the garden with them every day. They don't have to help me, although that would be appreciated. But I'd love to be with them. For the last 10 years, maybe a bit longer, gardening has been my salvation for my mental health. This is a problem in our world that I can't stress. My daughter's bipolar. She just got off an episode of manic psychosis. She's still manic. She flies down today to visit her boyfriend. I'm scared to death. I don't know what's going to happen in the airport because if you confront her, it could end badly. But the only way I've been able to pull it together is when I get really upset, I go to the garden. I allow it to heal me. And that's so important because to breathe that fresh air, to have the sun on your back, to feel the connection with the universe, because you realize you're so small and you can't control these little things. My mental health would have been gone by now if it weren't for gardening. Try it. It's amazing.
There's a wonderful hymn called "I Come to the Garden."
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
that, and that when you're saying that, that reminded me of that hymn.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yep. They have actually proven that gardening has so many benefits for you. There's a Japanese garden down outside of Miami. It's still in the same county, but outside of Miami. And I thought I wrote the name down, but I didn't. It starts with an M. You can Google it. It's a garden and Japanese museum. And they created a connection next door with the hospital because the hospital was having so many problems with the nurses, not the patients. And so the head of the nurses decided that she would send her nurses over there to be engaged with nature, to find out what could happen.
Brilliant.
It was brilliant. They developed this program that now the patients go there. They actually go and they reduce their blood pressure. They reduce the amount of medication that they need, and they are more physically healthy as well as mental. It's all documented. For years, us gardeners have known this, but now there's statistics to go around it. If you want to read some amazing stories, Kathleen Wolf is a social scientist. I think that's what her degree is in University of Washington, and wolf without an E on the end, just like the animal wolf. And she has pulled together all these statistics that we use when we're trying to get a grant to show the difference that gardening can make, being outside. There is a terrific study being done up in New York in one of the major New York hospitals, that just looking at a picture of a garden will help you. They've created lobbies where you can look outside at a courtyard. If you can't get out, at least you can look at it. Do your health a favor, get outside. It's not just being out there, it's the having your hands in the soil, smelling those, I'm gonna say ingredients, not ingredients, in your soil. All of that will help your mental and physical health. It's amazing. And it allows me to communicate with people that I've never met before. I'm really an introvert. Nobody believes me, but I really am. But I can talk about gardening forever to anybody. My husband will tell you I can. He says that, Cindy, every time you start talking, the subject always goes back to gardening. I said, of course it does. What else is there? But it allows you, know how they say people will talk to you if you have a dog? Start talking to them about how they grow their tomatoes, or how they grow their herbs, or your favorite begonia. You'll be able to strike up a conversation with somebody that might not even speak English that well, because we all have that common language, or many of us, not all of us. That's the problem in the world. We don't all have that connection. So communicate with your neighbors. Professionally, I got into gardening just because I wanted to make the place prettier. That's all I wanted. I was going to be a landscape designer, and I wanted to get know more about my plants. So that's why I started working on the public garden. And then I found out the full gamut of what you can do and how you can communicate with people, how you can teach people, how you can engage people. So my goal has always been to help areas develop community gardens or bring awareness to them so that you can have a place in the community to engage with others. You have that place that's a center of the community where you can dance, you can laugh, you can grow vegetables, you can talk poetry, you can sing, you can have a class, a ministry, anything. Have it in a community garden, in places that don't have that connection with other people. I'll tell you more about that in a bit. But that place to gather has really been important to me as we get so separated. That's really important. I don't know if I can ever leave horticulture because I so enjoy working with youth. And I could never, my dad was an elementary principal and a lay minister, and I could never do what he did. I thought to not being in education my whole life because I saw what he had to go through grading papers. I said, oh, heck no, I'm not ever doing that. But it is the most fun thing I do now, working with interns from all over the United States and helping them figure out how they're going to save the world. So many people, youth, do not know what they want to do when they're growing up. How many of you, when you graduated from high school, figured out what you wanted to do immediately? And you stuck with it the rest of your life? Okay, how many people? What, two? Okay, two. So 2 people out of this whole group knew. My first degree is in dermatology. Actually, I started in chemistry, but I was only one of 5. I was only one woman out of 5 chemistry majors that I said, I'm going to be in this laboratory with these guys the rest of my life? I don't think so. And then I married a chemist. But anyway, but I decided that these youth are leaving high school, college with a degree, but no path in life, nothing. They ain't know how to do it. They got their degree in environmental studies. They don't even get a degree in horticulture anymore because they don't know what horticulture is. No career counselor. I didn't know what it was. No career counselor tells you about that. But they want to save the world. How are you going to save the world? One plant at a time, one connection at a time, one recycling ability at a time. Whether you're a marketing major, a theologist, I didn't know that about you until later, so that's really cool. I'm going to find out more. Whatever your degree is in, we need your help in a public garden. We need your help in a community garden for it to be successful. So I reach out, I have a special internship with American University that has no horticulture class, but they want their students to be leaders in the community. So it's called Learning by Leading. And I teach the students how to be leaders. They get a project. They have to figure it out. The last class did a podcast. Smithsonian won't let me podcast it yet, but it's on our website and you can see they're interviewing people that got into the world of green without having a degree in horticulture. And to me, that is my true life's calling. You keep, every 5 years, you develop more and more and more, and your world gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you realize that you can't step out of what you're doing because it is you at this point. So if I could forever mentor an intern group, I would, as long as we can work in the garden too. It's a place for relaxation and enjoying yourself. And that's what we call ourselves at Smithsonian Gardens, which I hope you come down to visit. We call ourselves an urban oasis because usually, not right now, but usually downtown is just this hubbub of noise, of this chaos, of, you know, sometimes terrible smells. You haven't been in all the museums. Some of them are terrible smells. But if you're a person that has ADHD, or you are Asperger's child, or you're a family that has I can't think of the right term, you overreact to stimulus, go to the garden, relax, just enjoy. If you think that something is terrible in life, go to the garden, relax. After 9/11, and Green Spring is, like I said, right down here. We were in the garden, in the vegetable garden, working when the plane hit the Pentagon. We could hear it, and we already knew what happened that morning. All the public gardens that I know of saw an increased visitation after 9/11 because people didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to go. So they automatically turned to nature. This is part of an exhibit we have going on right now called, what do we call it? Habitat. Bringing the outdoors in. And it's all about biophilia. And biophilia, and I didn't bring that book, Edward O. Wilson. He didn't term it, Fromm termed it, and I can't think of Fromm's first name, Fromm.
Eric.
Thank you. Gosh, see, it takes a village. But Eric Fromm coined the term biophilia, but Wilson really brought it to life. And that's what we're doing in this exhibit, is bringing it to life. It's man's innate desire to be connected to nature. Innate, we can't help it. And if we try to stop it, I think we're not going to be as whole as we could be as if we allowed ourselves to participate in it. Even my staff members who are archivists that would rather be in a pile of dusty old papers than they would be outside, still go for walks. Still go. I thought we would do a team building exercise when I first came on board that would all go in the garden and weed. And Joyce told me she would quit if I ever made her. But she walks. She enjoys nature in her way. Find your way to be able to enjoy. And that's part of my goal. if you don't want to weed, fine. But did you know, see, I never knew this. I had to go to therapy myself with my daughter. And my therapist was making all these terrific connections. And she said in Nepal, people that have schizophrenia are taught or taken, I won't say taught, are taken to the road. And they are supposed to pull the weeds by the roadside. And they pull the weeds every day for years until they're finally cured. I have no statistics to prove that. But if you've ever weeded, when you start out that you're ready to punch somebody and you start weeding, you forget. Now you're just paying attention to what am I pulling up? I've identified what is truly a weed and what is something I want to keep. And that act of non-consciousness allows you to free your mind and get back to your soul. So that's a goal of mine professionally. And again, making the space a community space for people of all types, of all ages, of all genders, of all identification, feel welcome. And that's where we fail. It is part of Smithsonian's desire to be more inclusive, more diverse. Most of us that work in the museum, you're looking at them. Between my age, and I'm young, and I'm right before retirement. But there's so many women, 45 to 65. Those are the people that come to museums, people with secondary degrees. You might go as a school child, but you only return if you are a person that wants to continue to learn and you feel not just appreciated, but you feel welcome in the museums. You feel welcome in the gardens. We have not done our job. We have not made those gardens more accessible. And that is a big thing for me now. How do we make the gardens more accessible? I host, well, it's not weekly, but almost weekly, a webinar series called Let's Talk Gardens. And I wanted to be able to open this conversation up. So I got two friends. Katrina Lashley is the educator over at Anacostia Community Museum, which is part of Smithsonian. And Otter Lee is a graduate of the Longwood program. And she was the horticulturist at both Atlanta airfields, airfields. And so she was there. They're both Black. And I wanted to have the conversation with them for their communities because we're really trying to make Anacostia more accessible, the garden there more accessible to everyone. And in their communities, did the pandemic really cause their communities to go out and reach out in nature? Well, Anacostia only has one bus line that goes through from the community and very erratic. So how are they going to have a place to go to be able to enjoy this fresh air? I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a beautiful museum. I don't think, yes, it's finally open, but we also have exhibits on the outside with garden exhibits and one about talking about feeding people too. And only one. If you didn't have a car, how are you going to get there? If you didn't have a bicycle, how are you going to get there? It's not accessible. Ava Lee was talking about how her community in Atlanta, she was very gifted. She grew up in an area that was very natural. They had the land around them. But she went back to visit her mother and realized how it was starting to be closed off and how the community there no longer had access to Atlanta Botanical Garden. Highways are built from between to separate neighborhoods. Usually the better neighborhood is where the gardens are because they're older. How are you going to cross that highway? If all the faces are in the room are all white, are you going to feel welcome? Do you feel welcome in a room? And you can't lie now because you're in church and we'll be struck by lightning. Do you feel welcome in a room where all the faces are Black? Imagine what it's felt like on the other side. So if you don't feel welcome, why would that garden be accessible to you? At Green Spring, we were found by the Ethiopian church community. and I don't know this, so you can tell me whether it's right or not wrong, but what we found out was they would have the wedding in the morning. And then they were supposed to be outside eating, celebrating, doing their thing, and then have another ceremony at night. So they found green screen for that outside place to be able to do it. It's cool, except we're looking at it going, they're putting tables in our gardens. They're putting balloons, which we don't allow because that's bad for turtles. They're not following our rules. Why do we want them here? If we had to breathe. Still don't allow balloons, but unless you understand the community and make it more accessible, how is that garden really going to help heal everyone? I don't know. It's a huge conversation, Gardening does not pay well. We did a study within Fairfax County Park Authority. Why weren't more people of color working in the Park Authority? I started out the Park Authority making $5.75 an hour. If you've paid for your child to go through college and have this debt, do you really want them to start working at $5.75 an hour? I think it's up to 11 or 12 now, but still, is that a profession that you want your child to go to, or you want to, knowing that you can't pay back your bills? It's not accessible. We don't value teachers. We don't value people that do so much for us that make our lives better. I'm sorry, I'm not a football fan, but I learned that Alabama's coach makes $9 million a year. $9 million a year. I'm sure he's worth every penny. I hope he is. So with that in mind, and you said that I was in charge of archives. I am. I oversee our archives, which is an amazing archive filled with stories about gardens from the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was started, our first donation was by Garden Club of America. It was with glass lantern slides. And the glass lantern slides are pieces of artwork by themselves. They were shot in black and white, and then mostly women painted these tiny little, they're only about this big. They painted them with tiny little paintbrushes for color to make them come alive. So an amazing collection, and we continue to get these amazing collections. If you're a gardener, you might know the name of Ken Druce. Ken Druce is from New York and a terrific garden writer. Got his collection and several others. But I started to notice that most of our collections were with rich, white gardens. They all look the same, garden estates. Wait a minute. How come my grandmother's garden's not in there? I had two grandmothers. One was more into ornamental gardening. One was more into food production. They both lived through the Depression. The one that was in ornamental gardening, my grandfather was a minister and president of a college in Pennsylvania. That's why I said, when you said Morrisville. But you would not find either of those gardens in our collection. So if you don't see your face in that collection, do you think that you're a gardener that could influence others? So we started the Community of Gardens. And Community of Gardens is a digital archive. And anyone can share their story with us and their images. We need the highest quality images for our regular archive, but for the digital archive, snap it with your phone, send it to us, tell us your story. And we have gotten so many amazing, and I wrote down some of them that I wanted to share. So many amazing stories so that you can see what is. I love this quote too. The impact of a garden is rarely known by the gardeners who tend it, only by chance encounters or stories submitted are they known. So if you share your story with us, it's archived within the Smithsonian forever, well, as long as the computers work. Exists. But Anne Spencer was a poet in Lynchburg, Virginia, and she made one of the most amazing gardens to be able to invite people into her garden. She was Black. She was not considered a landscape architect or even a landscape designer at the time. She should have been, because her garden is amazing. We have her story. We've interviewed her granddaughter so that we could share that with people, making more aware. Aberlee is talking about conquering the soil in her story. One person wrote about her trans-masculine grandmother. Her grandmother at the time during I'm assuming it's before World War II, but I'm not positive on that. She never saw her grandmother in dresses, only in pants. So a trans person, before transgender, transsexual, trans anything, was making her point online and sharing, and now her grandchild shared her story with us. The importance of school gardening. This one I know, hopefully I won't cry for it. So the shooting that occurred in Florida not too long ago, they had a garden and the garden was being tended by the students. Not very successfully, but it was being tended. So the teacher wrote about a story about what happened after the shooting and about how this garden meant so much to the school then. They honored students and teachers that were shot in the garden. More parents came to talk to be able to be healed in the garden. And the garden, fortunately or unfortunately, is now thriving because of the grief that they had that was healed by that garden. We got a story from a woman who is a park ranger. And now I'm trying, it's a natural forest in California, but I can't remember. Anyway, go on and look. I forget what we're doing. But she rides her horse through the national forest, and that's her garden. Because her garden is just a gift. It's just the natural growth. So many stories are popping up. A young man who wanted to do something during the pandemic, he had to do a science experiment. So he started a garden, a food garden in his backyard, and it's thriving. Just so many stories we need to collect so people understand that gardeners don't need to look like me or like you. They can look like anybody. And those spaces are so important to us for so many reasons. Whatever yours might be, yours are going to be different from mine. But I would really enjoy having you visit the garden, have you promote gardens, have you join me in making gardens more accessible in your community. That's it. That's all I have. Everyone shared their story about gardening because there's so many. Should put this back on now,
Well, I just want to say thank you for what you do. Second thing is, biblically speaking, before the fall, we were born in the garden. We were born in the garden to tend it and enjoy it. So to me, your words are very real, and I thank you for them.
Well, I like community gardens because in Arlington, too much shade, too much gravel, too much clay. And so I've been there for years, well, since the 90s, 95. And during the pandemic, of course, it was already a place of comfort to me. But if I hadn't had my car and my garden, I would have had to use a lot more meds than I had to.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up the topic of River Farm and the recent victory that it has been saved. For me, it was just one of the most difficult experiences of frustration I had over the outside of my home during the lockdown. That this beautiful place was forbidden to visit. That had been such a source of joy and where I had volunteered, and to see it in such turmoil and at the mercy of in the news, the local newspapers for sale at an extraordinary price point, and the loss of those, the potential for that beautiful place to be destroyed for development or whatever. It's an amazing step forward for Alexandria, which in the last 20 years, I mean, I can remember, I'm not from this country, and I can remember what it was like to move here 20 years ago. I grew up with a 10 months winter in Canada. So to see the azaleas in the spring and to see roses in December was just extraordinary to me. And increasingly, the neighborhoods around this church have major diseases, crepe myrtle bark scale. People don't have time to take care of their real estate or the real estate is mowed down. These beautiful older gardens, you just see the azaleas just wiped out to create a driveway. I mean, I could go on and on, but I wanted to bring up the topic that as we are at one of my, I'm so thankful that River Farm for now is safe because it is accessible.
Yeah. It is partially
One of the panics during the pandemic, people don't realize, they say we can put things on hold for a year. You cannot put a garden on hold for years. You lose everything. And, when it was not possible, volunteers maintain all of Arlington's natural areas. And when they made it difficult for garden volunteers to do that, it was a challenge. It was amazing that we still have them. That it was, the agent, what she went through, we had all of these seeds that we give to homeowners to plant vegetables. They were all sorted and locked in the extension office. And I know some people that were really, they really got obsessive about making sure that every neighbor got a seed and identification of how to plant it and everything. It just, things that we never think of when you just can't go for a whole year and not do it. And of course, you kept your gardens going beautifully.
We did, only because they're considered essential workers. So essential workers, just like the zoo, I mean, you can't leave the animals by themselves. You can't leave plants either.
Yeah, and people don't realize that. They just think they're always there. They aren't.
Thank you for River Farm. Many places are suffering.
That was
Not just
good.
River Farm.
Remember River Farm.
That was great.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna speak up for those of us who are not master gardeners. I have a flower bed that's out by my sidewalk. It's not really very big. It used to be full of azaleas, so there was never anything growing there but the azaleas. But then they started dying, and so I started weeding it. And this last summer, I decided, okay, I'm getting some bedding plants and I'm putting them in here. And I put in vinca and snapdragons. And I gotta tell you, I got more people talking to me and complimenting and thanking me during this pandemic, apparently just coming along and even seeing one small little flower bed, just made them feel better. And that made me feel terrific.
A gift that gives and gives and gives.
It does give. And to what Judy was saying, there are many of us that, I speak for myself maybe, that cannot physically, always tend, and people who live in confined spaces, but you can have that garden and those plants in your confined spaces, in pots and all that sort of thing, and just enjoy it because it gives so much back to you.
Houseplants have really taken an upturn in popularity because we do have everybody poo-poos younger generation, not everybody, but many people poo-poo younger generations. Oh no, they're doing their part for it. They have made houseplants so popular because they're in small places. I go to visit my son. He lived in Mount Pleasant with his wife, and it looked like a jungle in there because they have adopted all these plants. So that's what brings them joy. They don't have any ground around them to do anything since they're in an apartment, but their house is now a jungle to go along.
So I grew up a little further north, and maybe even now the seasons aren't the same as they used to be, but if a person wanted to be outside now and do it in a green way and not get chewed up by mosquitoes, but be outside in all the seasons, is there a strategy that makes that a little easier?
If you want to be outside.
Yeah,
Yeah, now I don't get bit by mosquitoes usually, but this year was horrible. So there are different things that you can use. Lemongrass is one of the natural elements that you can use to help prevent mosquitoes. But my assistant at Green Spring was eaten alive by everything. We tried garlic, we tried dryer sheets, every thing that you read about. What she finally had to go to was physical barriers. So she wore a net over her, like she was going to go to the Amazon net, and she wore gloves and wore long sleeves. And that was the only way that she could do it. And she was a professional gardener, and that's what she had to turn to. So I would highly recommend that. But garlic, you can eat it, but nobody goes around you then. So you don't have to worry about mosquitoes at that point. But that's really interesting because it does make it difficult. Mhm.
I'm sorry, Sandy Calhoun has a question. Sandy, can you hear us and are you able to,
Yes, I can hear you.
can you ask your question for us, please?
I'm wondering what the future is for the Enid Haupt Garden by the castle. I find that pre-pandemic, I found that a very contemplative garden, and I know it was threatened for a while.
Yeah, its design might have been changed, but the Enid A. Haupt Garden can never go away. She gave us the money, the gift in perpetuity. So the garden cannot be, and the heads of Smithsonian realize that. They realize that even more now after they released that plan, that garden will be there.
Oh,
As
good.
all gardens, they'll probably change a little bit. You're gonna see some construction coming on it because as we grow, the Arts and Industry building doesn't have an indoor, well, it does have what do you call an HVAC system, but it's not good. So they are digging up the ground again. So part of the Hop Garden will be dug up again to be able to put that HVAC system in, but it will never disappear. The funds are there. The garden is beloved. The secretary knows it. Nobody's going to threaten it. But realize gardens do change. That's why we have the archives. So we have, things, but the garden will always be there, and it won't just be grass ever.
Good, thank you.
Sure.
I don't know where I read this, but I've mentioned this in the class before, probably more than once, because it always struck me so much. During World War II, that I think it was Churchill who said, or somebody very considered himself poetic or whatever, but when the bombing was taking place, that when the concrete and so forth would come up, some of the little shoots that came up, they said had been bulbs from Elizabethan times.
Oh, it could be.
I just found that romantic and joy to the world
Yeah.
and continuing life.
Yeah, the Colosseum, in Rome, the Colosseum, actually in the 1800s, when nobody was going in there, thank goodness, it had the best collection of native Italian plants than any other place because it was undisturbed.
Wow.
So through the Colosseum, through all that misery, through all, who knows where the seeds came from, sprouted these beautiful Italian native plants. So plants can come through. How come it will grow in concrete but won't grow in my garden? That is a mistake.
That is.
Well, thank you for your stories.
Is it Murakami? Is that the garden?
Murakami, yes, thank you. Oh my gosh, you found it.
Murakami is the two other things. The first that struck me so much was post 9/11. Garden visitation, if you will, participation, engagement
Memberships.
grows.
Mhm.
Needless to say, friends, what happened in our churches? The exact same thing,
That's right.
right? I mean, there was, dare I say, a renaissance of church participation.
Mhm.
Spiritual community participation after that tragedy, right? And then, Joanne, you brought up such a stunning, the image from the Bible we all think of, right, about a garden, is the Garden of Eden. But especially after hearing about the restorative components, properties for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, where do we find Jesus?
Yeah.
Garden of
And when he is crying tears of blood, right?
Yeah.
Needing courage, longing for relationship. He's in a garden.
Yeah.
So.
Where others could sleep because they were so calm.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen. So anyway, Cindy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Runners Magnificat at worship, so.
Oh, yeah.
All right.